In June of 2013, in the Supreme Court decision of the United States versus Windsor, the court declared that the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional and that the U.S. government must recognize same-sex marriages that have been approved by the states. Since that time, there have been a great number of court decisions, and at present, same-sex marriage is legal in more than 30 states. And so in this light, I wish to address the question of the redefinition of marriage. And in particular, I invite all Catholics to do 4 things. First of all, to love persons with same-sex attraction. Secondly, to speak the truth about marriage clearly and unequivocally, because charity and truth go together. They're like 2 sides of one coin. Third, to live the truth regarding marriage and sexuality. And fourth, to pray for the strengthening of marriage. And so 4 things. Love persons with same-sex attraction. Speak the truth about marriage clearly and unequivocally. Third, live the truth regarding marriage and sexuality. And fourth, pray for the strengthening of marriage. So first of all, let's explore in greater depth our call to love all people, and especially to love persons with same-sex attraction. I'm very happy and proud to count among my friends persons with same-sex attraction. Some I've known for a good number of years, and people for whom I have a great esteem and admiration. When I was a priest in the Diocese of Green Bay, I was the chaplain or the spiritual director to a ministry called Courage, and also its counterpart, Encourage. And those are spiritual support groups for persons with same-sex attraction, and also a group for parents, family, friends of persons with same-sex attraction. And I just can't tell you what outstanding people belong to these groups. And it was one of the great joyful ministries of my priesthood to develop these friendships and relationships, to get to know them better, and certainly be of great support. So the first thing we really need to do is to love people with same-sex attraction. In fact, the Catechism of the Catholic Church states, and I quote, "They must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. These persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives, and if they are Christians, to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross the difficulties they may encounter from their condition." End of quote. So the Catechism very clearly tells us, that persons with same-sex attraction must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. And we have this obligation to share that kind of love with everyone, and including, I think, and especially persons with same-sex attraction. The Catechism also says, the number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies is not negligible. This inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial. And I think people get hung up with these words, objectively disordered. That seems to be where the hang-up is. And I believe these words are very commonly misunderstood. I think people get the impression that somehow we're saying that, there's something bad about people with same-sex attraction, or there's something really defective about them. And that's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. And I'd like to put this into a greater context so we can understand what this means and how it is also a greater opportunity or area for us to engage in love and in solidarity with all people and with people of same-sex attraction. So first of all, what do we really mean by a disorder, or what we're talking about here? And I'd like to put it this way, or explain it this way. When I was growing up, there was a potato chip commercial. And the slogan for the potato chip commercial was, "No one can eat just one." And as kids, we tested this to see if it would work. And yep, it was right, we couldn't eat just one potato chip. And well, you know how it goes. You have a potato chip, and then another potato chip, and then before you realize it, you've eaten half the bag. And then you think to yourself, well gosh, I've already eaten half the bag, there's just that little bit left, I might as well finish it off. This is a disordered desire for potato chips. The fact of the matter is, every single one of us struggles with some kind of disorders, some kind of disordered desires. Everyone, as a result of original sin or other choices we make in our life or other various causes, we all struggle with some kind of disordered desires. And if you had an electronic version of the catechism, and if you searched disorder, you might find it coming up in different kinds of circumstances as well. For example, some people experience a disordered desire for material things or a disordered desire for money, otherwise known as tendencies to greed. And it's very easy for us sometimes to get way too attached to material things. That's a disordered desire. Some people have a real hard time, controlling their temper. And that's, disordered anger. Everybody, gets angry, but some people really have a hard time controlling it, lash out in all kinds of, vicious words or things like that when they're angry. That's a disorder. That's disordered anger. Some people struggle with that. Some people struggle with disordered desires for food. We call that gluttony. And that's a real struggle for some people. Some people struggle with disordered sexual desires that we call lust, which means looking at and treating people as if they were objects. And we could kind of go on and on with the list. And if we think, every one of us here struggles with something. We all struggle with some kind of, disordered desire, whatever that might be. And so if we're talking about persons with same-sex attraction, and if we're talking about the sexual desire for someone of the same sex as being a disordered desire, well, we're not necessarily saying something that's really all that different from what we might say about everybody. There's some difference in that there are some kind of disorders that can never really be rightly expressed. And there are others that could be. For example, it's possible to have a properly ordered desire for potato chips. Okay. But there can never be a properly ordered sexual desire for someone of the same sex. So that's what they mean by an objective disorder. But practically, if we think about how it's lived out in human experience, there's not a whole lot of difference, because we all struggle with something. We all struggle with something. And so, you know, these lines of the Catechism it's really not meant to single out persons with same-sex attraction, because every single one of us in the church struggles with something. And Pope Francis has talked about the church as being a field hospital, and it's exactly that, because, you know, we all have some things that we're struggling with, and so we're here as God's people, as his community, to support one another on the way to holiness. And so we come to the church that we can all help one another in our struggles, help one another overcome them. You know, so it's not really our purpose to encourage people to give in to them. You know, we don't encourage people who have a disordered anger, for example. We don't encourage them to give in to unleashing their temper, but try to help them, you know, work through that. So part of the point of loving persons with same-sex attraction is about loving everybody, and entering into solidarity with all of our brothers and sisters, because we all struggle with something. And so if we see someone or know someone who has same-sex attraction, well, we recognize in that person someone who is also struggling just as I am. It may be a different struggle. You know, all of us may have different struggles, but we all are having to work through something. And so in the church, how important it is for us to join together in love and solidarity, you know, with everyone, and to help us to work through our struggles, but not encourage each other to give in to them. And so with respect to persons of same-sex attraction, whom, you know, you might know, or maybe there are some of you here who you know, experience same-sex attraction. You know how important it is for us to reach out in friendship. You know, bend over backwards to show our love, our care, our concern. Of course, we wouldn't encourage them to act out on their sexual desires, just like we wouldn't encourage someone who has a problem with a temper to act out on their temper. So we as a church are in solidarity with one another. Of course, there's room in the church for persons with same-sex attraction, because there's room in the church for all of us, because we all struggle with some kind of disordered desire. The second, you know, invitation, you know, that I'm making is to, you know, to speak the truth about marriage. Speak that truth clearly and unequivocally. And I'd like to present, you know, two talking points, so to speak, that can help us enunciate, you know, the truth about marriage. And I'm going to ask for a little bit of audience participation to help us illustrate those. So I'd like to ask, you know, the women that are present, you know, here today. Is there something special about being a woman? Absolutely. Good answer. Okay. Okay, wonderful. There is something really special about being a woman, and so my follow-up question is, what really is special and unique about being a woman?
Giving birth.
Giving birth. Anything else?
Feminine genius.
Feminine genius. Anything else? Good answers.
Well, motherhood and nurturing.
Yeah.
Even if you don't give birth, you can still be a mother.
Yeah, motherhood and nurturing. You know, even if one doesn't give birth, there's a nurturing aspect to being a woman. Any other thoughts? You would know this better than I would.
I think women hold the family together.
Yeah, women hold family together. Okay, so the point is there's really something special and unique that women bring to the table. There really is. It's something we need to honor, you know, and treasure, and promote. Now, question to the men here: is there anything special about being a man? Is there? Yes. Okay. Yes. Good answer. Good answer. Yeah. So, what's unique, special about being a man? Okay. Okay, so there's a certain strength that is seen in men. Anything else?
Courage to be guardians.
Okay, courage to be guardians.
Upper body strength.
Upper body strength is mentioned. Heavy lifting. Okay. The honey-do list. Yes. A role model. Okay. Anything? Any other ideas?
Fatherhood.
Fatherhood.
Brotherhood.
Brotherhood. Yes. So my point is that there really is something special about being a woman, and there is really something special about being a man. And what a blessing it is that God has created us this way, because there's ways that we can really enrich each other. I know there's a family that I'm close to, and I think the wife knows how I'm feeling before I do. And I see people laughing, so perhaps it might be something you've experienced yourself. But it shows a little bit how that complementarity between men and women is something really special. Same-sex marriage says there's nothing special about being a man, there's nothing special about being a woman. Same-sex marriage says gender is irrelevant. And I think if we look at our own experience, we see that a relationship between a man and a woman just is not the same as a relationship between two men or a relationship between two women. It's just not the same. That there's something, unique about a relationship between a man and a woman that our common experience shows us. And the same-sex marriage really says, doesn't make a difference. And I propose to you that, that gender does make a difference, just because of who we are and the unique qualities that both men and women, bring to the table. So that's the first talking point. Second talking point has to do with rights. And oftentimes, the question about same-sex marriage is framed as a civil rights issue. That, well, shouldn't, two men have the right to marry each other just like everybody else has the right to marry? Or shouldn't two women have the right to marry each other just like, everyone else? And so in that context, I'd just like to think about it this way. Isn't it really a shame that a brother and a sister can't marry each other? Well, what if, if they grew up and they fell in love? Isn't it terrible discrimination that we don't permit brothers and sisters to marry each other? What about a mother and her son? The son grows up and the mother and the son fall in love with each other. Well, shouldn't they be able to marry each other? Aren't we denying them their rights if they can't? What about a father and his daughter? Daughter grows up and they fall in love. Shouldn't they be able to marry each other? Now, don't worry. I'm not promoting the marriage between brothers and sisters, and I'm not promoting the marriage between mothers and sons or fathers and daughters. my point is this, that just because some people are prohibited from marrying each other, it doesn't necessarily follow that their civil rights are being denied. That's my point. Okay, so it's not a denial of civil rights that brothers and sisters are prohibited from marrying each other. It's not a denial of civil rights that fathers and daughters and mothers and sons can't marry each other. So that while every person has a right to marry, not every person necessarily has a right to marry whomever they choose. For example, what if the person you fall in love with is already married to somebody else? Well, you wouldn't have the right to marry that person, right? Okay, and these are not civil rights violations. Okay, so just because, a certain, two people are prohibited from marrying each other doesn't mean that their right to marry is overall denied. Because we can think of all kinds of situations, like you fall in love with someone who's already married, they're already married, you don't have a right to marry them. Okay, so I think when we look at the civil rights issue, we have to see, well, what really is marriage? It really goes back to that question. It really goes back to that question. And so I think those are a couple talking points just that might help to illustrate the truth about marriage and sexuality, and I'd like to just speak about that a little bit more to help us understand this so we can articulate it even a little bit better, and maybe understand why now same-sex marriage seems to be even more widely accepted in our society. I think since the sexual revolution of the 1960s, there's been a real shift in the understanding of what human sexuality is all about. And if we were to look at popular culture, for example, in the United States, I think one might describe that as giving a vision of human sexuality in these terms. The meaning and purpose of sex is an intimate, pleasurable experience between two consenting adults. I think that's the vision that popular culture presents. That it's an intimate, pleasurable experience between two consenting adults. Does that sound familiar to you? But if that's all it is, well then why not between two men or two women? If that's all it is, well, there's no reason why it couldn't be between two men or two women. And I'm suggesting that this vision of our popular culture is really a very shallow vision. It's a very shallow vision, and I'd like to deepen that in just a moment. The other thing that I think has shifted in our society is an understanding of what marriage is. And in their book, What is Marriage a Defense, the authors Sharif Girgis, Ryan Anderson, and Robert George make an observation about a shift in the understanding of marriage, and they point to one contributing factor of that shift, and that's the passage of no-fault divorce laws. And think of the understanding of marriage that is underlying a no-fault divorce law. Basically, this, that marriage is a relationship for the emotional fulfillment of the parties, and if I'm not happy, I can get a divorce. That's kind of the understanding, and I'm afraid that much of our culture has bought into that understanding of marriage, that it's primarily for the emotional fulfillment of the parties, and if I'm not happy, I can get a divorce. And if that's all marriage is, well, why not between two men or two women if they're emotionally fulfilled? And it seems to me that that is also a very shallow understanding of what marriage is. But if these are the concepts that our culture, by and large, has adopted with respect to marriage and sexuality, we can now see why same-sex marriage is being even more widely accepted, because there's just a logical conclusion, based on these shallow understandings of what marriage and sexuality is. So I'd like to go a little bit deeper in exploring this meaning. And I'd like to ask a series of questions. How would you really like to be loved? Would you like to be loved totally or partially? Totally, I hope. Would you like to be loved conditionally or unconditionally? Would you like to be loved always or sometimes? Would you like to be loved your whole life long or just for a time? Would you like to be loved faithfully or unfaithfully? Well, these are deep desires of our hearts. I mean, that's really how we want to be loved. We want to be loved totally. We want to be loved unconditionally. We want to be loved always. We want to be loved our whole life long. We want to be loved faithfully. And these desires that I believe God has planted within us are ultimately only fulfilled by God's love. But marriage is meant to be a reflection of that. Marriage is meant to be a reflection of that. So marriage is not just a relationship for the emotional fulfillment of the parties, but it's meant to be, a permanent, faithful, total, always, lifetime commitment. Good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. That unconditional love is right in the marriage promises. All the days of my life is right in the marriage promises. And the nature of this love that is meant to be total and unconditional is expressed, or meant to be expressed, uniquely in the acts that are proper to marriage. And this leads us into understanding even more deeply the beauty and the mystery of human sexuality that God has given us. And just to help illustrate this a little bit, the gentleman here, I forgot your name already, Mike, in the front row here. It's a nice sweater you're wearing today. Would you be happy if I cut the sleeve off your sweater? No, you wouldn't be. Would you be happy if I cut off your arm instead? Is there a difference between cutting off the sleeve of your sweater and cutting off your arm? Yes. There is. Good answer. The point I'm trying to make is that our body is integrally a part of who we are as human beings. And what we do with our body, we do with our person, and what we do to the body, we do to the person. Our human body isn't something we just put on like my sport coat or a sweater. It's not just something we clothe ourselves with or a possession that we have that we use. Our body is integrally a part of who we are as human beings. And so if our bodies are really a part of who we are, well then so is our fertility. That's an inseparable part of who we are as human persons. And that's how God has made us. And so the beauty and the meaning of human sexuality, if it's meant to express this this total gift of one person to another. Not something partial, because we want to be loved totally, right? You know, if it's meant to express this total gift, then it has to include fertility, because fertility is really a part of who we are. Excluding fertility means not loving totally or not giving totally. It's either the failure to give a part of oneself or the failure to accept a real part of the other person. And if we were to look at same-sex acts, never have the capacity of expressing the total gift of one person to another, because they can never include the gift of fertility. They don't have that capacity. And so if we look really about what we believe about marriage and, and sexuality and, who we are as human beings, it all corresponds to these deep desires God has planted in our hearts of how we want to be loved. We want to be loved totally. We want to be loved unconditionally. We want to be loved faithfully. Always, our whole life long. We want someone to love all of us, not just parts of us. And this is a much, much deeper and much, much richer understanding of marriage and of sexuality than what our popular culture is portraying. And how important it is for us to, give witness to this by how we speak about marriage, how we speak about sexuality, how we help communicate the truth. Because just imagine the capacity of experiencing even more what it means to be loved if we were to live this truth. And so that leads into the third thing I'm inviting Catholics to do, and that's to live the truth about marriage and sexuality. We need to give witness to the truth by how we live in our lives. We need to do all we can to strengthen marriage. We need to do all we can to support married couples. Because what a wonderful vocation it is. It's a sacred vocation. It's about Christ's love for his church and letting that shine forth. We need to live the truth about sexuality and help people discover that there's a much, much deeper and richer meaning and much more beauty than what our popular culture, advertises. So that's the third thing. Live the truth of marriage and sexuality. Then finally, to conclude, how important it is for us to pray for the strengthening of marriage. There are so many struggles that married couples face today. There are so many pressures in our society that attack marriage. How important it is for us to pray for the strengthening of marriage. That more and more people, experience the fullness of God's plan and the wonderful healing of his love through this wonderful and beautiful state in life.